expressed his concerns about Lisa during his divorce. And thank you for taking my question.
They called it the wedding of the century. May 1st, 1967, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, marrying his sweetheart Priscilla Beaulieu in a private Las Vegas ceremony. The photos looked perfect. The smiles looked real. The world celebrated a fairy tale come true. But here's what they didn't tell you. Elvis Presley didn't want to get married. That's not speculation. That's not tabloid gossip. That's coming directly from his own family. Donna Presley, Elvis's cousin who worked closely with his father Vernon, said it explicitly in a recent interview. Elvis was coerced into that marriage. Forced. Pressured into saying, "I do," when everything inside him was screaming to run. Let that sink in for a moment. The most famous entertainer on the planet, a man who could sell out any venue, who had millions of fans willing to do anything for him. And he couldn't even choose whether or not to marry the woman standing beside him. So what does coerced actually mean? Because that's a strong word. That's not he had cold feet or he wasn't sure. That's not nervous groom jitters. Coercion means pressure. It means threats. It means feeling like you have no choice, even when technically you do. To understand why Elvis felt trapped, you have to go back to 1959. That's when 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu met 24-year-old Elvis Presley in Germany while he was serving in the army. Their age difference was already controversial, already raising eyebrows. But Elvis was untouchable at that point. He was America's golden boy, and the public was willing to overlook certain things. Fast forward to 1963. Priscilla moves into Graceland. She's 18. She's living under Elvis's roof, under his care, under his financial support. And the whispers are getting louder. The press is starting to ask questions. The Colonel, Elvis's notorious manager, Colonel Tom Parker, is panicking. Because in 1960s America, this kind of arrangement could destroy everything they'd built. Parker wasn't just concerned about morality. He was concerned about money. Elvis's career was a cash machine, and any scandal that threatened his squeaky clean image threatened the bottom line. Movie deals could evaporate. Concert venues could refuse bookings. Sponsors could walk away. The entire empire could crumble because of what people might think, what people might say. And here's where the coercion comes in. Elvis wasn't given options. He was given an ultimatum: marry her or face career suicide. Legitimize this relationship or watch everything you've worked for disappear. Make this official or deal with statutory rape accusations, morality charges, complete public destruction. Think about that pressure. Think about being told that your entire life's work, every song, every performance, every dream you've ever had, could be taken away because you fell in love with the wrong person at the wrong time. That's not a choice. That's a gun to your head. Vernon Presley saw what was happening. Elvis's father, the man who managed his son's business affairs, watched as the noose tightened. According to Donna, Elvis confided in Vernon and his grandmother about his concerns. He didn't want this marriage. He wasn't ready. He felt trapped. But what could Vernon do? He was caught in the same machine. The Colonel controlled access, controlled decisions, controlled the narrative. And Vernon knew that if Elvis refused to marry Priscilla, the fallout would be catastrophic, not just professionally, but legally. The Mann Act, which made it illegal to transport minors across state lines for immoral purposes, was still very much enforceable. Elvis had brought Priscilla from Germany to Tennessee. Technically, legally, he was vulnerable. So they set the date. May 1st, 1967, Las Vegas. A quick ceremony with minimal witnesses. Get it done, get it official, make the problem go away. And the world ate it up. Magazines ran glowing coverage. Fans cried tears of joy. Everyone celebrated the king finally settling down with his princess. Nobody asked whether the groom actually wanted to be there. Nobody questioned whether this was love or liability management. Look at the wedding photos again. Really look at them. Elvis's smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. There's tension in his jaw. Priscilla looks radiant, glowing, exactly like a bride should look. But Elvis looks like a man going through motions. Because that's exactly what he was doing. The cruelest part? Priscilla herself might not have fully understood what was happening. She was young, deeply in love, swept up in the fantasy of being Mrs. Elvis Presley. From her perspective, this was the culmination of their romance. She'd waited years for this. She'd given up her normal teenage life, moved across the world, molded herself into exactly what she thought Elvis wanted. But Elvis wasn't marrying her because he wanted to spend forever with her. He was marrying her because powerful men in suits told him he had no other choice. And here's what makes this even more tragic. Maybe in another world, under different circumstances, Elvis would have chosen to marry Priscilla. Maybe if they'd been allowed to date normally, to grow together without the pressure and the threats and the ultimatums, they could have built something real, something lasting. Instead, their marriage was born from coercion. It started with pressure and fear, not love and commitment. And maybe that's why it fell apart so quickly. Maybe that's why Elvis seemed so detached, why he spent so much time on the road, why the relationship never quite worked the way fairy tales are supposed to work. You can't force love. You can force a ceremony. You can force signatures on a marriage license. You can force someone to stand at an altar and say the words. But you can't force the truth. And the truth is this: the wedding of the century was built on coercion. The king of rock and roll was trapped by the very fame that made him royalty, and the woman who became his wife entered a marriage that her husband never truly chose. That's not a love story, that's a tragedy, and it was only the beginning. For decades, there's been a persistent rumor that refuses to die. Elvis Presley had a secret daughter named Desiree, born to a woman named Lucy DeBarbin when Elvis was still a teenager. Lucy's story is compelling. She claims Elvis called her for years. Her other daughters verified hearing those phone calls. Desiree herself seems genuine, emotional, and convinced of her paternity. She says she doesn't want money from the estate. She just wants acknowledgement. She just wants the truth. And yet, when Donna Presley is asked about this claim, her response isn't diplomatic. It isn't measured. It's absolute. Elvis had one child and one child only, and that's Lisa Marie Presley. No hesitation. No, I don't know. No, it's possible. Just a flat, emphatic denial. So why does this story keep circulating? Why do people want to believe it? Because it fits a narrative we desperately want to be true. That Elvis had secret loves, hidden relationships, a life beyond the carefully controlled image the Colonel manufactured. We want to believe he had authentic connections that existed outside the machine. We want there to be more to his story than what we were shown. But here's the harder truth. Elvis was terrified of being exploited. He'd seen what happened when people claimed connections to him. He'd watched countless women come forward with stories, allegations, paternity claims. Some were sincere, some were opportunistic. All of them threatened the empire. Elvis knew that his name, his legacy, his connection to anything or anyone had monetary value. And he was ruthlessly protective of that value, not because he was greedy, but because he'd learned the hard way that everyone wanted a piece of him. Everyone wanted to claim they were special, they were different, they were the one who really knew him. So when family members like Donna shut down the Desiree story so completely, it's not necessarily because they're hiding something. It's because they watched Elvis deal with these claims his entire life. They watched him build walls to protect himself. They watched him limit his vulnerability because vulnerability could be weaponized. And honestly, if Elvis had another child, if there was any legitimate possibility that Desiree was his daughter, don't you think he would have provided for her? This was a man who gave cars to strangers, who paid medical bills for people he'd just met, who donated enormous sums to charities without fanfare. If he truly believed he had a second daughter, wouldn't he have done something, set up a trust, made provisions? But he didn't, because in his mind, in his reality, he had one daughter, Lisa Marie. And that's where the real tragedy of this story lives. Not in the daughter who may or may not exist, but in the daughter who absolutely did exist and who he could barely see. When Elvis and Priscilla divorced in 1973, Lisa Marie was only 5 years old. The custody arrangement meant she would live primarily with her mother in California. Elvis would have visitation rights, scheduled time, appointments with his own child. Donna Presley confirms that Elvis was devastated by this arrangement. He confided in Vernon, in his grandmother, expressing concerns about Lisa not living with him on a regular basis, about only seeing her at certain times. Imagine being Elvis Presley. You can command a stage in front of thousands. You can make women faint with a single hip movement. You have wealth most people can't comprehend. And yet you can't tuck your daughter into bed every night. You can't be there when she wakes up from a nightmare. You can't have breakfast with her on a random Tuesday morning. You're reduced to a visitor in your child's life. That's the cruelty of custody arrangements. That's the hidden cost of divorce. It doesn't matter how famous you are, how much money you have, how much love you feel. If the court says you get your child every other weekend and alternating holidays, that's what you get. You're a guest star in the story of your own daughter's childhood. And for a man like Elvis, who gave so much to so many people, who was generous to a fault, who literally couldn't walk past someone in need without helping them, this powerlessness must have been crushing. He could buy Lisa Marie anything she wanted, but he couldn't buy time with her. He could give her every material advantage, but he couldn't give her a normal father-daughter relationship. He could ensure she never wanted for anything, except his presence, his consistency, him. Here's what makes this even more painful. While Elvis was fighting to see his own daughter, he was still being incredibly generous to everyone else. He was still the guy who handed out Cadillacs, who paid for strangers' hospital bills, who gave jewelry to women he'd just met, who funded charitable causes without seeking recognition. To the world, Elvis was endlessly available, endlessly giving, a man who existed to serve, to provide, to make dreams come true. But to his own daughter, he was a part-time dad, a weekend father, someone she saw at certain times. The contrast is heartbreaking, and it raises uncomfortable questions about Priscilla's role in all of this, because she was the one who filed for divorce. She was the one who took Lisa Marie to California. She was the one who controlled access to the child Elvis desperately wanted to see more often. Was she protecting Lisa Marie? Was she building a new life for herself? Was she punishing Elvis for the failure of their marriage? Or was it some combination of all three? We can't know Priscilla's internal motivations, but we can see the result: a father separated from his daughter, a child growing up between two worlds, a relationship that should have been effortless, made complicated by lawyers and court orders and geographical distance. And here's the cruelest irony of all. Elvis was coerced into marrying Priscilla to protect his image, to legitimize their relationship, to do the right thing in the eyes of society and the law. And what did that forced marriage ultimately cost him? His freedom, his autonomy, his daily relationship with his only child. He sacrificed himself to avoid scandal, and the reward for that sacrifice was losing what mattered most. So when people ask about secret daughters and hidden children, when they want to believe that Elvis had some other family somewhere, maybe what they're really looking for is evidence that he found happiness. That somewhere in his complicated, controlled, exploited life, there was authentic connection that nobody could take away from him. But the truth is simpler and sadder. Elvis had one daughter. He loved her desperately, and he couldn't be with her as much as he wanted. No secret, no conspiracy, just a father's broken heart. Priscilla Presley wants to be buried at Graceland, next to Elvis, in the meditation garden where the king of rock and roll rests alongside his mother Gladys, his father Vernon, and his daughter Lisa Marie. When most people hear that, they think, well, of course, she was his wife, that makes sense. But when Donna Presley hears it, her reaction is visceral. She calls it strange, unusual. She says Graceland was never really Priscilla's home. And then she drops this line: I find it very strange that she would want to be buried at Graceland. It's not her home. That's not subtle. That's not diplomatic family politeness. That's barely concealed fury. And once you look at the actual numbers, you start to understand why the family feels this way. Priscilla was married to Elvis for 6 years. 6 years. They married in 1967 and separated in 1972, with the divorce finalized in 1973. 6 years of legal marriage, and for much of that time, Elvis was on the road making movies, living his life largely separate from her. Now compare that to Marco Garibaldi. Priscilla lived with Marco for more than 20 years. She had a son with him, Navarone. She built a life with him in California that lasted more than 3 times longer than her marriage to Elvis. So let's do the math. 6 years with Elvis versus over 20 years with Marco. And yet when it comes time to plan her eternal rest, it's not Marco she wants to lie beside. It's Elvis. Why? Donna Presley raises this exact question, and she doesn't try to hide her skepticism. If Priscilla spent decades with another man, had a child with another man, built a life with another man, then why does she want to spend eternity next to the husband she divorced half a century ago? And here's another detail that makes this even more complicated. Priscilla never particularly liked being at Graceland when she was alive. According to Donna, Priscilla much preferred California. She wasn't the type to embrace Memphis, to sink roots into Tennessee, to truly make Graceland her sanctuary. She tolerated it because that's where Elvis was. But the moment she had the freedom to choose, she went west. She built her life somewhere else. She created distance between herself and everything Graceland represented. So why, after all these years, after all that distance, does she suddenly want Graceland to be her final resting place? The family has a theory, and it's not flattering. Because here's what happens when Priscilla is buried at Graceland. She becomes permanently linked to the Elvis Presley story, not as an ex-wife, not as someone who was there for a brief chapter, but as someone who belongs there, someone whose name will forever be connected to his in the most literal, physical way possible. Tourists visiting Elvis's grave will see her name too. Documentaries about Elvis's final resting place will have to mention her. The narrative of Elvis and Priscilla gets cemented into the ground itself. And maybe that's the point. Because let's be honest about something. Priscilla's relevance, her fame, her entire public identity is built on those 6 years with Elvis. Without him, she's not a household name. Without him, she's not a cultural icon. Without him, there are no interviews, no documentaries, no decades-long career managing his estate and controlling his image. Elvis is her brand. He always has been, and a burial at Graceland ensures that brand continues forever. The family sees this. They understand the symbolism, and it bothers them deeply. Because from their perspective, Graceland isn't just a tourist attraction. It's family ground. It's where people who truly belonged in Elvis's life are laid to rest. Gladys, who loved him unconditionally. Vernon, who protected him and worked for him until the end. Lisa Marie, his only child, who carried his legacy in her blood. Those people earned their place there through decades of devotion, through authentic connection, through bonds that couldn't be broken by divorce papers or geographical distance. But Priscilla, she walked away. She filed for divorce. She took Lisa Marie to California. She built a new life with someone else. She made her choices. And now she wants to unmake those choices symbolically by claiming a plot next to the man she left. It feels like revisionist history. It feels like performance. It feels like the final act of a carefully curated public image rather than genuine devotion. Compare this to Lisa Marie's burial. Nobody questioned whether she belonged at Graceland. Of course she did. She was his daughter. She was born into that legacy. She carried the Presley name not through marriage but through blood. Her place there was never in doubt. But Priscilla's request, that's controversial, that's complicated. That's something the family clearly struggles with. And here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What would Elvis want? We know he was coerced into marrying her. We know he was devastated when she took Lisa Marie away. We know their marriage was troubled from the start and ended in divorce. So would he really want Priscilla buried beside him for all eternity? Or would he prefer that space remain open for someone else? For someone who was there in ways Priscilla never was? For someone whose commitment didn't end when the marriage did? The family can't answer that definitively. Elvis is gone and he can't speak for himself. But their reaction tells you what they believe. They think this is wrong. They think this is about legacy management, not love. They think Priscilla is claiming a place in Elvis's eternity that she doesn't deserve. And maybe they're right. Because if you truly loved someone, if you truly wanted to be with them forever, would you have divorced them in the first place? Or would you only want to be buried beside them, after realizing that your relevance dies when the connection to them is severed? Priscilla calls it her final wish. The family calls it something else entirely. And somewhere in the meditation garden at Graceland, next to 3 people who never left him, there's a space waiting. The question is, who does it really belong to? Step back for a moment. Look at what we've just uncovered. 3 separate controversies, 3 different chapters of Elvis's life, 3 seemingly unrelated stories. But they're not unrelated at all. The forced marriage, the custody battle that kept him from his daughter, the burial dispute that continues decades after his death. These aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of the same disease. Elvis Presley never controlled his own life. Think about that. The most famous entertainer in the world, a man who could fill stadiums with a single announcement, a cultural icon whose influence shaped generations. And he couldn't choose whether to get married. He couldn't decide how often he saw his own child, and now he can't even determine who gets buried next to him. At every turn, someone else was making decisions for him. The Colonel deciding which movies he'd make. Priscilla deciding where Lisa Marie would live. Estate executors deciding what happens to his final resting place. Managers, handlers, lawyers, ex-wives, Everyone had a say in Elvis's life except Elvis himself. And it started long before the marriage, long before the fame became unmanageable. Colonel Tom Parker didn't see Elvis as a person. He saw him as a product, a commodity to be managed, marketed, and monetized. Every decision the colonel made was about profit, about control, about maintaining the machine. Elvis wanted to tour internationally. Too complicated for the colonel, who was hiding his own immigration issues. Elvis wanted to take dramatic film roles that would showcase his acting ability. No, the colonel booked him in formulaic beach movies that required less effort and generated quick cash. Elvis had dreams. He had artistic ambitions. He had ideas about what his career could become, and at every turn someone told him no. Someone redirected him. Someone convinced him that what he wanted didn't matter as much as what was profitable, what was safe, what was controllable. The marriage to Priscilla fits perfectly into this pattern. Elvis's personal desires were irrelevant. The relationship had become a liability, so it needed to be legitimized. It didn't matter that he felt coerced. It didn't matter that he wasn't ready. The decision was made for him, and his job was to show up and smile for the cameras. And when that marriage fell apart, when Priscilla filed for divorce, Elvis once again lost control. He didn't get to decide custody arrangements. He didn't get to determine where his daughter would live or how often he'd see her. The courts decided. Lawyers negotiated. And Elvis, the man who could buy anything, who could make almost any wish come true for others, couldn't buy back daily access to his own child. He was reduced to scheduled visits, to negotiated holidays, to being a guest in his daughter's life instead of a constant presence. That's not fatherhood on his terms. That's fatherhood on someone else's schedule. Here's what makes this even more tragic. We have evidence that Elvis was trying to build independence. Donna Presley mentions that there were blueprints for a recording studio at Graceland. Elvis and Vernon were planning it. They wanted Elvis to be able to record at home, on his own terms, without having to go to Nashville or Los Angeles or wherever the label demanded. Think about what that represents. Elvis, late in his life, finally trying to carve out creative autonomy, trying to build a space where he could make music the way he wanted, when he wanted, without layers of management and executives and handlers controlling every decision. He wanted to record in the jungle room at Graceland because it was his space, his sanctuary, the one place where maybe, just maybe, he could be himself instead of being Elvis Presley trademark, the carefully managed brand. And that recording studio, it would have been revolutionary. Donna points out that Elvis was ahead of his time because now every major artist has a home studio. Now creative control and independence are standard. But in Elvis's era, that was radical. That was an artist saying, "I'm taking back control of my own work." But we don't know if it ever got built. We don't know if Elvis lived long enough to see that dream realized. Because on August 16, 1977, at just 42 years old, Elvis Presley died. And the control he'd been fighting for his entire life, it didn't come with death, it got worse. Because now the battles are about his estate, about who profits from his image, about how his story gets told, about who gets buried near him, about which version of Elvis the public gets to see and remember. Priscilla served as executor of his estate for years. She had control over Graceland, over licensing, over how Elvis's legacy was managed and monetized. The woman he was coerced into marrying, the woman he divorced, the woman who took his daughter to California, she became the gatekeeper of his memory. Is that what Elvis would have wanted? We can't know for certain. But based on everything we've learned, the coerced marriage, the family's discomfort with her burial plans, the fact that she represents a chapter of his life that was marked by control and loss, it seems unlikely. The current estate battles, the conflicts over Graceland's management, the family tensions that play out in public, these are all continuations of the same pattern. Elvis's life, his legacy, his memory are still being fought over by people with competing interests. And the one person whose voice should matter most is the one person who can't speak anymore. Here's the devastating truth. Elvis Presley spent his entire life being managed by the Colonel, managed by Hollywood studios, managed by Priscilla during their marriage, managed by court-ordered custody arrangements, managed by everyone except himself. He was the king who was never truly sovereign. He was the icon who couldn't control his own image. He was the father who couldn't be with his daughter. He was the artist who couldn't make the music he wanted on his own terms. He was the man who gave everything to everyone and couldn't keep anything for himself. And now, almost 50 years after his death, the people who claim to love him, who claim to honor him, who claim to protect his legacy, they're still fighting for control, still making decisions about what he would have wanted, still shaping his story to fit their narratives. The forced marriage told us Elvis didn't control his personal life. The custody battle told us he didn't control his family life. The burial controversy tells us he doesn't even control his final rest. So here's the question that should haunt everyone who loves Elvis, everyone who respects his legacy, everyone who claims to speak for him. If Elvis Presley couldn't escape control in life, will his memory ever be free in death? Or will the king remain a prisoner forever, even in eternity? The truth about Elvis is complicated, controversial, and still unfolding. Which revelation shocked you most? The coerced marriage, the custody heartbreak, or Priscilla's burial plans? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to keep exposing the real stories behind the legends, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because the next video, it's going to reveal even more secrets the Presley family has kept hidden for decades. You won't want to miss it.